I'm not ashamed.
How did the magicians turn their rods into serpents? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
It's worth the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 7. We're going to be reading from verses 8 to 13. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 7, beginning at verse 8. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, Show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, Take your rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so, just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, so the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. For every man threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, and Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, as the Lord had said. At the beginning of this chapter, we find God sending Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh to demand Pharaoh let the children of Israel go. Aaron was going to be Moses' mouthpiece, as Moses didn't believe he was eloquent enough to convince Pharaoh to do the bidding of the Lord. When Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 years old. The Lord told Moses that when they came to Pharaoh, Pharaoh would ask them for a sign. If you recall from our study of Matthew, this would be the same type of request that the Pharisees made of Jesus. They wanted a sign that he was from God in spite of the many miracles that he had already performed. Pharaoh, being the hard-hearted man that he was, and having already rejected Moses' earlier request to allow the children of Israel to go and worship in the wilderness, was going to be no different, for he wasn't simply going to accept Moses as speaking for God. The sign that Moses was to have Aaron perform was turning the rod into a serpent. Remembering back to chapter 4, this is one of the wonders that Moses was to perform before the children of Israel in order to convince them that he was from God. But in verse 21 of chapter 4, God also said that these signs would also be performed before Pharaoh. When Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh, lo and behold, Pharaoh, just as the Lord said, asked for a sign, and Aaron turned his rod into a snake. However, the Pharaoh wasn't convinced, for perhaps Aaron had performed some sort of deception or magic trick. So he called his wise men, sorcerers, and magicians to see if they could do something similar. If they could, it would show that he wouldn't have to heed Moses' God, for he wasn't more powerful than his own magicians. From 2 Timothy 3, verse 8, we find that two of these men were named Jannes and Jambres. Pharaoh asked them to copy the wonders that Aaron had performed, and after doing their enchantments, they threw down their rods, and they became serpents as well. Now, it should be noted that the scriptures say that the magicians actually did produce serpents, so we should not assume that this was somehow an optical illusion that Pharaoh was fooled by. The question is, how did they do it? The scriptures clearly state that magic and witchcraft are an abomination before the Lord, for they are not real. They are only lying wonders meant to fool people into believing that mankind has the power that he does not possess. So if the magicians really couldn't turn rods into snakes by their own power, what happened here? Well, there are two options. The first one is that the rods that the magicians possessed were actually snakes that were made to look stiff like rods. Therefore, when the rods were thrown down, they became snakes. In truth, if this is what happened, the rods were snakes all along, and Pharaoh was simply fooled into thinking that a transformation had taken place. Magicians or illusionists do this today through sleight of hand and trickery, getting us to think something is true when it is not. However, there is another possibility, which is that God allowed these men to actually turn their rods into snakes. In 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 11 and 12, when Saul went to the witch at Endor in order to talk to the spirit of Samuel, the witch did not have the power to summon spirits, yet by the power of God, God allowed her to summon Samuel's spirit, and Saul spoke to the spirit of Samuel that night. In order to magnify his power, God could have allowed these magicians to perform a real miracle here. How would God's power be magnified through these magicians performing this miracle? By what Aaron's rod did next. You see, through whatever means the magicians had produced serpents, Aaron's serpent ate all of the magician's serpents. That occurrence would have been quite a sight to behold and should have shown Pharaoh who was in control. Aaron and Moses and the God that they spoke for. However, that is not how Pharaoh saw it, for he hardened his heart and refused to hear their words just as the Lord had said. Now to us reading this story, this certainly seems strange. Pharaoh had seen a sign done through Aaron and Moses, and even though his magicians performed something similar, Pharaoh had then seen the superiority of Aaron's and Moses' serpent over those of his magicians. Why didn't Pharaoh believe? It's because of his heart. It was hard to begin with, and it became harder after the sign was shown to him. We face this attitude in people today, for in some cases it doesn't matter how much scripture we can read to someone. It doesn't matter how many hours we study with them. Some people will simply not obey the gospel. They will always come up with some excuse as to why they can't or won't believe. That was the Pharisees in Jesus' day, and that was Pharaoh here. God presented Pharaoh with a sign that a man who had a softened heart would have believed, but one who had a hardened heart would reject. In presenting this sign to Pharaoh for him to reject, God was exposing Pharaoh for the evil, stubborn man that he was, which will pave the way into the punishment that God will inflict on Egypt in the form of plagues. We'll begin our look at the first plague, the Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 7, verses 14 to 18, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not a
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
of his cross.